Joining me now for an exclusive interview via Zoom, live from the Bangko Sentral, is Governor Eli Remolona. A happy Hearts Day to you, Governor. Good to see you again. Thank you so much for joining us.
Happy Valentine's, Kathy.
Yes, you bet. You know, you broke a lot of hearts today, or that was yesterday, because you made an announcement that was quite unexpected. Nearly everybody expected
Yes.
the Monetary Board to take a rate cut by about 25 basis points.
Yes. Normally, Kathy, we don't like to surprise the markets. But there was a new factor at play, so we had to pause.
And you had to pause because of uncertainties. I mean, was it an easy call
Yes.
to have decided to stay on hold?
It wasn't easy. It was a complicated decision, but as you know, we normally like to take baby steps in the same direction. But we found that we decided that it was better to pause now and then ease later than ease now and then have to reverse ourselves later. I think that would be less disruptive to the markets.
But you know, you came out with a decision at just before 4 p.m. I mean, if it was really contentious, it would have happened maybe after. But you decided in the 3 o'clock hour.
Well, we started to meet at 9 in the morning, and we had decided by maybe 11 in the morning, and then we released the statement at 3 in the afternoon.
Were there dissenters, Governor?
It was a complicated discussion.
Well, I'm sure it was. I mean, well, were there dissenters? I mean, what was the mood like in the conversations you've had with the Monetary Board?
You know, it's always collegial on the Monetary Board, but there were many points of view, and we had to reconcile the different points of view. In the end, we decided to be cautious. So we decided to pause and await further assessments of what's going on. As you know, the economy has many moving parts, and we use models to analyze the economy. The models that we now have don't quite capture this new uncertainty that we're facing. It's kind of a new phenomenon for us. So we're recalibrating our models, as I'm sure other central banks are, and then we'll look at the analysis again and decide the next time what to do.
Talk to us about that recalibration. You mentioned new moving parts there. What were the determining factor or factors that got the Monetary Board to decide to take a pause?
The biggest factor, Kathy, is what we would call global policy uncertainty. We can measure that, and that has spiked in the last few weeks. So we're trying to put that into our models, and it's not easy because it's a big model, and we actually look at more than one model. We look at 3 models, and so we're trying to figure out how to do it. I'm sure other central banks are doing the same thing, and we're going to be comparing notes with other central banks. But we should have a better understanding of what's going on by the time of the next policy meeting.
Talk to us about those 3 models that you're now having to grapple with and the kind of collaboration that you intend to make with the other central banks, presumably Asian central banks, to get a bit of a grip on these global uncertainties that you mentioned.
Yeah, so we have a core model that takes account of the more basic moving parts. They're analyzed together, and then we have extra models that look at things separately. This is also what other central banks do, and then we reconcile what the core model says with what the other models say. That's almost an art, but the models themselves are kind of engineering, an engineering kind of work. But they're reconciling the different models requires judgment, and that's why we have a monetary board. We have a monetary board that has good judgment about the economy.
And between art and science, if you will, I mean, just coming into the central bank meeting, there were a lot of points that we've had to consider as journalists. I mean, Fed Chair Jay Powell, he had a testimony on Tuesday that had him saying that the Fed is in no rush to cut rates. And then came the hotter U.S. CPI print. Now, that complicated further the Fed's timing of its next rate cut. And then post-decision, we've had Trump's round of reciprocal tariffs. That just came about a couple of hours ago after saying that he'd like to see the Fed cut rates further, saying that lower rates would go well with his tariffs. So how much do you think is the Trump pronouncement or pronouncements? How are they going to figure into how the Monetary Board will decide in the next couple of months before the next policy meeting?
I would say, Kathy, the policy announcements themselves, the tariff announcement themselves, are not so complicated. We just stick them into our models and see what the models say. What's harder is the environment of uncertainty surrounding those decisions. That itself is a factor, and that's the factor that's hard to model. And so we decided we would be more comfortable figuring out how that plays into the movements of the economy before we actually make a decision.
What about when it comes to reciprocal tariffs, Governor? Because Nomura came out with a global report saying they are a big concern, especially for the Asian economies, including the Philippines. We've got data from Nomura saying that all Philippine exports may be subject to these higher tariffs. So exports making up about at least 2.5% of the Philippine GDP. So how are you factoring that in with the kind of models that you're working with, the Monetary Board?
Looking at the most recent announcements, we think the effect on the Philippines will be fairly modest. First, our exports to the United States are relatively small. They're like 16% of all our exports, even though the U.S. is still our major export partner. And then our trade with the U.S., a good chunk of it is not goods, but services. So we feel that the effects on us, the direct effects on us, will be modest. What we worry about is the indirect effect, the spillover effects from the global economy.
So what then would that mean to your own inflation projections for the rest of the year and how you decide moving forward into the April Monetary Board meeting?
I think that factor by itself, as it is for most of the world, will mean a bit more inflation. But other factors that are going on in the Philippines suggest little change in our inflation forecast. And this is not taking account of the factor of uncertainty, the more fundamental factor of uncertainty.
So you're still sticking with the headline inflation average of 3.3% this year? And the 2 to 4% target still remains for the annual?
Yes. And inflationary expectations are still within the target range.
So what happens now, Governor, to the triple R cut? I mean, people were expecting this. Will this come just before the April meeting? What can we indicate for the reserve requirement ratios?
It's possible, Kathy. Yes, that's possible. It's something we want to do. And it's not part of our monetary policy stance. It's just something we want to do for the sake of efficiency in the financial system. So it's a more structural factor. It's not a cyclical factor.
All right. So you mentioned late last year the peso could hit to 60 to the dollar. Is this now a bigger possibility after all that's happened?
It is a possibility. It is a possibility. We don't worry too much about the number itself, Kathy. We worry about large swings in the exchange rate because it's when we have large swings that we get this inflationary effect of the exchange rate. As you know, some of our imports are invoiced in dollars. So because of that, if the swings are large enough, then we can get inflationary effects. And then we'd like to dampen those swings somehow.
So what is your view now on the current dollar-peso moves?
I think for now they're driven largely by the strength of the dollar. That has been the case since the beginning of the year. If we adjust for dollar strength, the peso would have appreciated by about 34.34%. And this is the story. This is last year that was most of the story. It was mostly dollar strength rather than peso weakness.
All right, Governor, we have about 2 minutes left. I've had more of those polymer banknotes here versus paper notes in my traditional wallet at the start of this year. Thankfully, I had one to show the audience here. And in more
Yes.
denominations, it started with the thousands and then 50s, hundreds.
Yes, yes.
I wanted to know what data we have on the recorded counterfeits so far since these polymers were made available last December.
Yes, yes. I don't have the exact numbers, Kathy, but counterfeiting has dramatically declined since we issued these polymer banknotes. They're very hard to counterfeit, and they're pretty, aren't they?
They are. In fact, it doesn't get folded even as I want. They get bent. But for sure, this is going to be spent after this interview.
Okay.
It will not go very far. Just one last question on the FATF, the Financial Action Task
Yes.
Force. I know that you mentioned we've got a 50% chance that we'll be let off the dirty list because of the counterfeiting. How much of a chance would be that we might be off the list by next week?
I would say better than 50, better than 50%. We've done all that they asked us to do. In fact, we've done more than what they've asked us to do. So I think there's a good chance that we will be off the list by the evening of February 21st.
Wow, that's something I'm going to look forward to, and that's going to be the big news for this 22nd then. Well, thank you so much for indulging us your time, Governor Eli Remolona,
Good to see you,
live
Kathy.
from the Bangko Sentral in Manila. Have a great weekend, sir.